It's a tough one because both teams were really good.
Why can't you people just leave me alone?
When I was a little kid, I used to hang out with my grandfather, who was in his 90s.
A waitress made fun of Clint Eastwood in his own restaurant. The movie star walked in, but she treated him like any other customer. She didn't know who he was and spoke to him rudely, making everyone around uncomfortable. Whispers spread as people realized who he was. Tune in to see how this shocking moment changed everything for her. The waitress who missed a legend. Clint Eastwood walked into the restaurant, his restaurant. But he wasn't the kind of guy to make a big entrance. He just strolled in like any other person, wearing a simple jacket and a hat that might have hidden who he was to the untrained eye. This wasn't some Hollywood premiere or a red carpet moment. It was Clint in his element. The man owns the place. He's had his hand in the restaurant business for years, even if most people only know him for his iconic stare and gravelly voice. But not everyone in the room caught on to who he was, or cared, apparently. But Clint wasn't there for the food. The waitress, young and overly confident, probably new to the job, had her own way of handling things. She saw him as just another customer, some older man who probably wanted a cup of coffee and maybe a slice of pie. Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, and the way she handled herself was more high school cafeteria than professional dining. When he asked about the menu, she barely glanced up from whatever she was doing. She rattled off a few options like she was talking to her little brother, barely hiding the eye roll that came with her words. This wasn't the treatment anyone expected for a man who'd become a cultural icon. He, ever the cool and composed figure, didn't let it faze him. He'd probably seen 1,000 versions of this scenario play out before, but the situation had a funny way of snowballing. The waitress's dismissive attitude grew into outright sarcasm. Maybe she thought she was being funny, or maybe she really didn't know who she was talking to. Either way, she made some crack about the restaurant being a decent enough place, but definitely not some five-star thing, as if she was schooling this random old guy on the place he'd poured his time and energy into. The other patrons started to notice. A few nudged their dining companions, whispering and pointing subtly. There he was, sitting there like he's just another guy. But to the waitress, he wasn't someone special. He was just some older man taking up a table. Her comments became bolder, her tone sharper, and the sense of secondhand embarrassment among the other diners grew by the second. It was like watching a car inch toward a cliff and no one could look away. By now, whispers had turned into murmurs, and even the kitchen staff seemed to have caught wind of what was going on. Heads peeked out from behind swinging doors, and the buzz in the room was impossible to ignore. Yet the waitress remained in her bubble of ignorance, blissfully unaware of the magnitude of her misstep. Eventually, someone from the staff, perhaps the manager or a fellow server, intervened. There was a quiet conversation near the bar, hushed voices and frantic gestures that told the whole story. The waitress froze mid-step, her expression shifting from casual indifference to something closer to panic. It was the kind of moment where all the blood drains from your face and you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else is playing chess. When the waitress finally returned to his table, her demeanor had done a complete 180. Gone was the sarcastic edge, replaced by an almost painful politeness that made her earlier behavior even more glaring. She fumbled through an apology, stumbling over her words as she tried to salvage the situation. But he, in his true fashion, didn't hold a grudge. He waved it off with a smile that was as much an acknowledgement of the absurdity as it was an act of grace. He'd seen it all before, after all. The story doesn't end there, though. By the time he finished his meal and left the restaurant, the tale had already started to spread. The waitress's blunder became the talk of the town, a cautionary tale about knowing your audience and not letting arrogance get the better of you. For him, it was just another day, another story to add to his already legendary life. But for the waitress, it was a lesson she wouldn't soon forget, a reminder that sometimes the most unassuming people are the ones you should pay the most attention to. The aftermath of the incident rippled far beyond the walls of the restaurant. Word of the waitress's misstep spread quickly, fueled by social media posts and local gossip. People began sharing their own encounters with him, painting a picture of a man who was humble, approachable, and surprisingly down-to-earth despite his legendary status. The restaurant itself saw a surge in visitors, with curious customers hoping for a glimpse of the icon who had unknowingly turned an ordinary day into a memorable spectacle. For the waitress, the experience became a turning point. She spent the days that followed reflecting on her actions, cringing at the memory of her behavior. It was a tough pill to swallow, but it served as a wake-up call. She began to approach her job with a newfound sense of humility, treating every customer with the respect and attention they deserved. The incident became a defining moment in her life, a story she would recount years later with a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. As Clint left, no one knew it would change her life. A quiet stand in a room full of glamour. The room fell silent. The tension was palpable, every eye in the restaurant now focused on the scene. Miguel's bus tub slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor with a loud clatter. Thomas, who had been making his way over, froze mid-step, his face pale. He set his glass down slowly, the movement deliberate and commanding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a brief call, he requested the ownership papers and renovation plans to be brought to him immediately. When he ended the call, he looked back at Rachel, who was now visibly shaken. "You see, Rachel," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I bought this restaurant 6 months ago. I've been sitting at this table every Friday since. Not for the luxury, not for the prestige, but because this place stood for something real. 50 years ago, the Grand Oak was a place where everyone was treated with respect, regardless of who they were or what they wore. That's what I wanted to preserve." As he spoke, Jerry, the restaurant's accountant, arrived with a leather portfolio containing the documents he'd requested. Jerry handed them over with a respectful nod, stepping back to let him continue. Rachel's face had turned pale, the weight of her actions sinking in. He gestured toward Miguel. "This young man recognized me not because of social media or status, but because he watched my films with his family. He understands something you don't. Respect isn't about appearances, it's about how we treat people." Turning back to Rachel, he offered her a choice. "You can leave and find another job where appearances are all that matter, or you can stay and learn what real hospitality means. Miguel will start training as a waiter. If you choose to stay, you'll learn from him and the rest of the staff what it means to truly serve others." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'd like to stay and learn, sir." He nodded, finishing his whiskey and standing up. "Good choice," he said simply. As he walked out, the room erupted in quiet applause, not for the celebrity in their midst, but for the lesson in humility and respect they'd all just witnessed. In the weeks that followed, the Grand Oak underwent a subtle transformation. Rachel's attitude softened, her eagerness replaced by a genuine desire to connect with guests. She learned to notice the details that mattered, not the designer labels or flashy attitudes, but the small moments of joy and appreciation from every customer. Miguel took his training seriously, moving up from busboy to waiter with ease. His confidence grew not just in his job, but in his ability to make a difference, one guest at a time. The regulars at the Grand Oak noticed the changes too. The older couple who had watched the scene that night became even more frequent visitors, often sharing stories with Miguel about their favorite films. The staff's camaraderie strengthened, their shared respect for the restaurant's core values, creating a bond that extended beyond their shifts. Even the influencers and tech moguls began to appreciate the sincerity of the service, their superficial expectations replaced by a genuine admiration for the warmth of the place. And every Friday, Clint Eastwood could still be found at his corner table, sipping his whiskey and observing the scene. He didn't need grand gestures or loud declarations. His presence alone was a quiet reminder that respect and authenticity would always have a place at the Grand Oak. The restaurant's success wasn't just in its luxury, but in its heart, a legacy of dignity and kindness that Clint had ensured would live on. Picture this: a fancy restaurant, posh vibes everywhere, and a waitress with an attitude so loud it practically echoes off the crystal chandeliers. Now throw Clint Eastwood into the mix. You know, the guy who's all about squinty stares and iconic one-liners. But let's dive deeper, because this isn't just any night. This is the night a clueless server decides to treat Clint like some regular Joe, not realizing he's the man who owns the whole darn place. Let's talk about the food, because let's be real, that's why we're here. Clint teamed up with a chef who knows his stuff, crafting a menu that's all about local, fresh, and ridiculously delicious ingredients. We're talking ribeye steaks that are so tender they practically melt, roasted beet salads that make you forget you're eating vegetables, and desserts that could win awards. The strawberry shortcake? A masterpiece of simplicity and flavor. Every dish tells a story, a nod to the land and the history of the place, but it's not just about the food, it's the people who make the magic happen. Clint's all about fostering a team that's as passionate as he is. He's the kind of guy who'll notice the busboy with a spark in his eye and help him climb the ranks. Case in point, Miguel. This kid started out clearing tables but had big dreams of becoming a chef. Clint saw that fire and made sure Miguel got the training he needed. Fast forward, and Miguel's not just part of the team, he's a rising star in the kitchen. Picture Clint strolling into his own restaurant, casual as ever. He's not one for grand entrances or letting people know he's a big deal. He'd rather sit quietly in a corner observing, soaking it all in. But on this particular night, fate had other plans. Enter the waitress, all attitude and no clue who she's dealing with. She's dismissive, maybe even a little snarky, and completely oblivious that the guy she's brushing off is the owner of the joint. Now, Clint's not the type to throw his weight around. He's got that quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need validation. So, he lets it slide, taking mental notes as the night goes on. It's not about revenge or proving a point, it's about understanding what's happening under the surface. Why is this server acting like this? Is it just a bad day, or is there a bigger issue at play? The restaurant changes and every dish carries a glimpse of something lasting, where every meal tells a story. When the night's over, Clint doesn't storm out or demand to see the manager. Instead, he takes his observations back to the drawing board. Maybe it's time for a staff meeting, a little refresher on what the Grand Oak stands for. It's a place of warmth, connection, and respect, values that Clint holds close to his heart. And if someone on the team isn't living up to that, well, it's an opportunity to make things right. But here's the thing about Clint, he's not just about fixing problems, he's about creating legacies. The Grand Oak isn't just a restaurant, it's a beacon of what's possible when you combine history, heart, and a little Hollywood flair. It's a place where the past meets the present, where every meal tells a story, and where even a less than perfect night can lead to something better. The Grand Oak has this magnetic charm that draws people in, not just for the food, but for the experience. Picture this: families gathering for special occasions, couples enjoying intimate dinners, and friends reconnecting over wine and laughter. It's more than just a restaurant. It's a haven, a space that feels like home no matter who you are. And Clint's fingerprints are all over it, from the ambience to the attention to detail that makes every visit memorable. Let's not forget about the behind-the-scenes magic that keeps the place running like a well-oiled machine. Clint's philosophy is simple: respect the land, honor the community, and never compromise on quality. That's why nearly every ingredient is sourced locally, from the tender steaks to the fresh herbs that garnish the plates. It's not just about supporting local farmers and reducing the carbon footprint, it's about creating a connection between the food on your plate and the land it came from. And then there's the decor. Every inch of the Grand Oak has been thoughtfully designed to blend old-world charm with modern elegance. The original wooden beams have been lovingly restored, antique furnishings add a touch of history, and the lighting creates a warm, inviting glow. It's the kind of place where you can feel the stories in the walls, where every detail whispers of a time when life was simpler, but just as full of meaning. As the years pass, the Grand Oak continues to thrive, its reputation growing as a destination for food lovers and history buffs alike. People come from miles around to experience the magic, drawn by tales of Clint's involvement and the promise of an extraordinary meal. But it's not just about the celebrity factor. At its core, the Grand Oak is about authenticity, about creating moments that matter, and about preserving a legacy that will endure for generations. Even Clint's personal connection to the place remains strong. He's a regular fixture, often seen quietly enjoying a meal in his favorite corner. He's not there to bask in the limelight, he's there to reflect, to observe, and to soak in the atmosphere he's worked so hard to create. For Clint, the Grand Oak is more than just a business venture. It's a labor of love, a tangible expression of his values and his vision. The Grand Oak stands as a shining example of what's possible when passion, purpose, and a deep respect for tradition come together. It's a place where history is celebrated, where community is nurtured, and where every guest is treated like family. Through his involvement, Clint has not only preserved a piece of Cherry Valley's heritage, but has also created a space where the simple joys of good food and good company can be savored and cherished. And there's even more to it. Beyond the day-to-day operations, the restaurant serves as a model for how businesses can integrate sustainability without sacrificing quality or experience. Clint's commitment to reducing waste and sourcing renewable energy is evident in every aspect of the Grand Oak. Solar panels discreetly tucked away power much of the restaurant, and the kitchen's zero-waste initiative ensures that even the smallest scraps find a meaningful purpose. These steps are not just good business practices, they reflect a philosophy rooted in respecting the environment and preserving it for future generations. The community connection is equally powerful. Clint has made sure that the Grand Oak is not just a restaurant, but a gathering place that gives back. Charity dinners, local fundraisers, and workshops with nearby schools have transformed it into more than a dining destination. It's become a hub of activity, fostering a deeper relationship between the restaurant and the people it serves. Local artists showcase their work in rotating exhibits, and musicians often fill the space with live performances that enhance the already rich atmosphere. It's this layered approach that makes the Grand Oak truly exceptional. From the first sip of wine to the last bite of dessert, every experience is meticulously designed to leave a lasting impression. Guests often comment not just on the food, but on the intangible sense of belonging they feel when they walk through the doors. That's the magic of Clint's vision, creating a place where everyone, from the staff to the patrons, feels a part of something bigger. What truly elevates the Grand Oak is the attention paid to the little moments. A guest once recalled how a waiter noticed they were celebrating a special anniversary and discreetly brought out a complimentary dessert with a handwritten note. It's these personalized touches that have transformed the restaurant from a dining spot into a memory-making destination. It's clear Clint's influence extends far beyond the menu. It's woven into the way people are treated and the memories they take home. For those who dine regularly, the Grand Oak is a second home, but for newcomers, it feels like a hidden gem. Stories of encounters with Clint himself have become part of the allure, shared in whispers or proud declarations to friends. Spotting him quietly observing the restaurant's rhythm, sometimes exchanging a few words with the staff, only adds to the magic. It's a reminder that this legendary figure isn't just an icon of the silver screen, but a man with a genuine love for creating something meaningful. Was Rachel's transformation at the Grand Oak a genuine change of heart, or just a survival tactic in a world obsessed with appearances? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe for more stories.